My name is Lorena Cernet, or in Spanish, Lorena. I'm actually the one person at Teachstone who's dedicated to international for class. And so I've been with the company about 2.5 years. And I really love to connect and interact with people all over the world who are using class. Interactions are definitely universal. So today I'm very excited to be able to facilitate this amazing global panel. We have 4 people joining us today. First, we will have Yair Ziv from the University of Haifa in Israel present some information about class in his country. Second, we welcome Armida Lizárraga from Peru. And she's from a company called Luminario, which is a foundation located in Lima. And last but not least, from our great neighbor to the north, Canada, we have Veronica Smith and Stephanie Hayes from the University of Alberta in Edmonton. So quickly, I just wanted to go over the format that we'll use today for the panel. Each panelist is going to present around 20 minutes. And then we ask that you do hold your questions to the end. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end. And then we also will have some small group as well as a larger group discussion towards the end. And before we start, I have a few questions for you all. Number 1, I'd like to know where you're from. I know a lot of people already here, but please let me know where you're from. Where do you come from?
From California, Los Angeles, and Child 360.
Excellent. From Los Angeles, California. How about you ladies in the back?
From Palm Beach County, Florida.
Palm Beach County? Florida. Excellent. We have other Florida person right here in the middle. And how about you ladies also in the back?
Seattle.
Seattle. Washington is represented. Excellent.
Central Texas.
And Texas. Wonderful. And we have Maryland as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Please raise your hand if you are a coach. Great. How about administrator? All right. And teachers? Okay. Anybody that works as a researcher or at the university? Over here. Excellent. Teachstone. We have some people from Teachstone too. Wonderful. And how about age levels? How many are working with infant and toddler? Okay, great. Pre-K? Wonderful. Anybody doing K3, UE, or secondary? Okay, we've got a good mix across the board. And then last question I have for you. Do you have programs where the children and families have a home language which is not English? If you do, raise your hand. Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, with that, I am going to pass the mic over to Yair to talk about Israel.
Thank you. I'm just going to go a little bit over there because it's hard for me to see. And you can hear me, right? Okay, so I'm going to talk about some stuff that we're doing with the class in Israel, and I'm doing it with my colleagues. So Avi Sagi-Schwartz and Noah Yezer, all hard names, Israeli names, from the University of Haifa. And I just want to acknowledge our collaborators and partners, all the people that are doing the great work with us, like the real work. These are the people that are doing all the real work, and I'm just presenting it. And all our partners, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Welfare, Labor and Social Services, Hebrew University, and Bar-Ilan University. So I thought, or actually our main person thought that it would be good to give some context about Israel, so you know where we're coming from. So here's a map of Africa and the Middle East and Europe, so the Mediterranean, and we are here. So this little thing here, this is Israel. So for a place that you hear so much about in the news, it's a really small, tiny place. And if you just want to make a comparison, so if you look about, I think the state that looks about the same as Israel is New Jersey. So about sizes, this is what we're talking about in terms of size, and a little bit more information about Israel. So it's we have just a little less than 9 million people, and it's a relatively young country. Like the median age is less than 30, so and a lot of children. The average yearly household income is about $60,000 a year, but unfortunately, in terms of inequality, income inequality, it's second only to the US. The US is the only country with larger levels of inequality of all OECD countries. We have, and this is more related to what we are doing, what we're going to talk about right now. We have mandatory free education from age 3 in Israel, but I'm also going to talk about the birth to 3 age level, so we're going to talk about, understand what's going on there. And in terms of structural quality, we have some issues, crowded classrooms, for example, up to 35 children in the K classrooms with 2 adults. This is like the norm in Israel. So bear in mind when we are talking about processes, bear in mind the structure, which is not the best in Israel. And just a little bit about class in Israel. So I was here for many years, and I learned about the class. I was first at the University of Maryland, then at Westat, which is a very large research corporation. And I first learned about the class in 2003, and did some training with the class even before it was before there was Teachtone. And so we started doing classroom assessment like in FACES study at Head Start. And then when I came to Israel, I kind of brought it with me, and about the same time, which is really what made the change in Israel, Bob Pianta came to Israel. So in about 2010, he came to Israel, gave a big presentation that really made a difference. And then at the end of the same year, Sarah Hayden came to Israel and did some training about the K-3. And she trained observers, she trained trainers. So they are qualified observer and trainers for preschool, K-3. Secondary too, but I don't know them. So it's like a different place. But there are people there, I heard. So, okay. So this is where we are right now. So there is quite a lot of work done in Israel with the class, because there are quite a few attachment researchers in Israel, especially the University of Haifa, where I come from. We really, when we saw the class, like I guess a lot of other people, it's not a researchy thing to say, but we fell in love. So and since then we are following. So, and just to finish the context, so this is where I come from. This is the city of Haifa, and this is the university. It's a beautiful university on the mountain. I'm heading the early education and development program at the Faculty of Education, Department of Human Development. And this is primarily a graduate school, university. We have more graduate than undergrad students. It's one of 6 public research universities in the country. So this is the context. And now I can start and give you the objective of this presentation. I'm going to talk about two initiatives that we did. I'm a researcher. Most of my work is research, but this is not what I'm going to talk about here. Just a little bit of research. I'm going to talk about specific initiatives in which we partner with the government. We want to do some stuff on a national basis. I think because we're a smaller country, we have more opportunity to do this. So we thought we can use the class as a very strong research and theoretical framework to make this change. So we worked with the Office of Early Childhood Education, which is in charge of preschool education, and this is part of the Department of Ed. And then we work with the Office of Daycare, which is in charge of the birth to 3, and this is, there is history why it's within the Ministry of Labor, Welfare and Social Services, but this is where it is. And this is like this is important because this ministry has no, let's say, not a lot of association to education. Okay, so the history is that he was there because daycare was supposed to be for the mothers, right? So they can go out to work. This is why it's in this ministry. Okay, so what I'm going to present is our attempt to influence the perception of, government officials, the perception of people at the highest level, and by using a system and inserting what is called developmentally appropriate practices, DAP. And the aim is to try to get to the highest levels so we can get a sustainable change. Okay, so we make a change and then it stays, and it will stay after we finish our project, and it will be part of the system. This is what we're trying to do in these two initiatives. And before I'm going to talk about them, I'm just going to show you just a short slide from our research to see if it's an appropriate question. Is class really culturally appropriate to be used in Israel? So just comparing data from the NCEDL study to our data in Israel, and you can see, while there are some significant differences, but basically you can see it's very similar. So just to answer the question if it is culturally appropriate, it seems to be. There are some issues, and we might have the time to talk about culture and how it is perceived in different countries, because there are some, when we teach the class, there are some things the teacher tell us about the class. They say, this is not us. So we can talk about it later. But in terms of findings, you can see that it's pretty much comparable. Like the scores, it's like higher on the emotional support and classroom organization, and lower on instructional support, just like you find everywhere. Exactly the same. So the first initiative is a class-based training for kindergarten teachers. We did it. We started this a few years back, and what we thought is that to make a sustainable change, we need to use existing platforms. So we didn't want to come and say, we actually thought about it, said, okay, there's like the MTP and all these different systems, but we said it's not going to be sustainable in our country. We need to use what is being used. So what is being used is part of a requirement for all teachers. It's not only kindergarten teachers, all teachers in Israel, they have to go through in-service, like at least 60 hours a year, and they have to do 2 of these. So we created a 30-hour, 10-session class-based training for kindergarten teachers. we used, so this is what I said, and then we tested the efficacy of this training program to see. So we did the research when we did the training. We also did research, and we assessed class 3 times before we started the training program, after, and then a year after that. So short term and long term. And as I said, this is repeating what I said before. The idea is that if you use the mechanism that is existing, there's a better chance to have a sustainable system. So, as I said, like 10 3-hour sessions in centers for teacher professional development. So there are centers all around the country for where teachers come and do those sessions. So this 30-hour training session. So and we created this program, this training program, which I think is, I mean, I don't know, but it looks like it might be very similar to a lot of the training program, the yeah, it should be similar. Maybe this is a little bit more hours than what you do. So introducing up-to-date education developmental models. So we brought what we thought are relevant theoretical models and worked with the teachers on them, told them about the class as an approach that may change classroom interaction and all of these different aspects of the intervention. However, with time I just need, because I have 2 initiatives, so the session are organized according to a class structure, but I'm just gonna, I'm going to give you the presentation so you can look at them. I'm not gonna go through the sessions now, okay? It's good that I asked you about the time. So these are the 10 sessions, and we might get to them after that. And just really shortly telling you if it was successful or not. So we did we designed like an intervention study, and we looked at differences between the training and a control group of a matched control group, similar in size and all the other aspects of kindergarten teachers. We found no differences in time 1, which this is what we wanted. We did not find anything at time 2, which is not what we wanted. But then, a year later, we did find differences, which is encouraging, and I think we should, it's an important finding, which speaks to the when to measure efficacy. So sometimes it takes a bit longer to see aspects. And then at time 3, we did see significant differences in emotional support, all the expected direction and classroom organization, but we did not see anything in instructional support, unfortunately. Specifically, we found improvements in teacher sensitivity, behavior management, and productivity. We failed to make a change in the aspect that we wanted to make the biggest change, so instructional support, which suggested to us that maybe those 30-hour 10 session is not enough for this. And then we did a follow-up, but I'm not going to talk about the follow-up because we created another second 30-hour. Yeah, so now there are actually like a first session, a 30, and then there's an advanced one. Okay, so I'm jumping to the second initiative because I guess I have 5 minutes for this one, but because this is the one that I really wanted to talk about. So this is the one that we're doing right now, and we are working with, I mean, I'm going to call them here accreditation officers, but I guess these are maybe QC people. I don't know how you call them here. I'll just tell you these are people with a lot of power. A lot of power from the government side. They can come to a place and say, we shut you I mean, these are the people with the power. Okay, so we thought we should work with these people because the experience in Israel with this kind of accreditation procedure is not good, and we'll talk about it. It's very, it used to be, these are the people that you know, when they come, people are fearful. So it's like, so we said, okay, let's work with them. Let's do a theory and practice-based accreditation process in all Israeli daycare centers supervised by the government. Now, as I said, from age 3, education is mandatory, so everything is supervised by the government, but the birth to 3, we're not there yet. We're hoping to get to the place where all the daycares are, but right now we're talking about 25% of all daycare centers that are supervised. Others could be, you know, with like great quality because they're like, you know, paid more over there, and some could be in awful quality. But we are concentrating on those 25% of classes. So we use the class toddler and infant as well as the eaters are as the basis of our training program for all of these people. So this is what we do with, this is what we do with them. Now I'm telling you in the order that we wanted to be. When we started, we actually started with a 60-hour class and eaters course. And then we realized they know nothing about child development. So it's actually flipped. We started here, and then we did a 60-hour child development course, but from now on, this is how we are going to work. So first do a 60-hour child development course, which is basically like a university level course, like a bachelor level, undergraduate level child development course. Then a 60-hour class and eater course, 60-hour practice assessment, which they go to daycares and do assessment, supervise and everything. And the supervision is done by early childhood education expert. Now this is the system that is going, this is what we're being promised, that this is the system that is going to be on from now on. So all accreditation officer will go through this from now on. But right now, we completed, like all the people that are working in these positions in Israel already went through all of this. The new ones will get through it again. So we created a manual that I'm going to skip, but it's like they have a manual which is based heavily on child development and relationship based on everything, understanding systems in Israel and around the world, understanding the theories that behind the measures that we are teaching them, introducing class and eaters are. And by the way, we thought at the beginning to only use the class, and we realized the class some is a little bit. When I mean, the eaters is much easier to use. If you know it, it's like, you know, it's a checklist. It's much easier. So we made a combination of basically taking the class as more of like a framework of thinking and using some of the methods from the eaters to do the assessment, because we don't expect them to be reliable assessors. And then this is what we agreed upon after a lot of discussion, because originally we wanted to have more. We thought that we should have more than, but this is what we've been again promised, that this will be this, so they will go to every daycare center, we'll observe them every classroom 3 times a year, at least 2.5 hours, and there will be a combination of items from the from the two measures. And then the officer is supervised by a trained child development expert, like how to communicate. And this is extremely important because, as I told you before, they are used to communicate in a very directive way, which was not very helpful. So this is what we already did, and this is already something that we did. Then there are a lot of people, so we also need to train all the daycare, providers. So first, starting with we call managers. I'm not sure it's about the people that are in charge. So this is something that we already do. Then training developmental coaches. So each daycare is required to have a coach that work with the teachers and everything. So we do some training, and this is our partners from Hebrew University are doing this, and we had some discussion yesterday with Lorena and about how we can maybe use the class in training the coaches, creating. There was no curriculum in Israeli daycares, and now we created the best national curriculum, and it's all working like together. So we're saying, okay, we work with them to see that what the officers and are measuring is coherent with the curriculum. So it's all like an effort, and this is done by our partners at Bar-Ilan University. And obviously we need to train the teachers, but we haven't started this yet. This will be the biggest challenge, but I think the training of the teachers will go with the coaches. So I'm just going to describe a number of challenges. We have a lot of challenges, and this could be at the beginning of a discussion, those challenges. First of all, as I told you, the structural quality in Israel is relatively low. Large number of children, non-optimal adult-child ratio, low teacher education, low pay, and especially important, very high turnover, extremely high. So you can have I wrote teachers here, but we don't call them teachers. They're called caretakers, and this is important by itself. You don't call them teachers, and they might come and they get minimum wage, and they will stay for 2 months and then they'll go in another one. So think about it in terms of building relationships, like in class. So this is a major issue. Changing their mindset is very complex. As I told you, these are people with power, and they used to have this power, and they used to, they're not child development experts. And this is part of the history of what I told you, or why it's in the Department of Labor, right? So it was built on negative rather than on positive attitudes. So change this or. There are so many other players involved. Daycares are operated by different organizations, all of different agendas. So it's complicated. And then we have all the time pressure from the government to lower the standards. So even though we're doing it, so we're trying to create and work with, so I'm sure you know about it, but we want to maintain a little bit of standard, and for now, but right now we're in the optimistic part of the work. I mean, it's still going on, and we think it's a great opportunity. So I just wanted to share this with you and be able to answer question. Is it now or after?
Later.
Later, okay. So thank you for now.
Thank you, Yannick.
We're going to do quick, small group discussion at your tables. Yeah, you mentioned that a couple of the challenges already that you just talked about is changing mindset, right? Trying to implement something new, trying to change attitudes and mindsets. So I'd like you to discuss at your table. If you're all alone and want to join someone else or another group, please feel free to do so. But I want you to discuss for a minute or two, what approaches have you used in your professional experience to change mindsets? I know there was a very quick, small group discussion, but would anyone like to share what you discussed at your table about changing mindsets? Have you been successful in doing that during your professional career? Or even personal, actually? Anyone?
Well, we talked about that you can't cram it down anybody's throat, that you have to first listen to what their concerns are, understand their separate reality, which is really, really important, and then sometimes give them the opportunity to see the positive impact of a change that somebody else has made, and then they may be more willing to try and achieve that themselves.
Anyone else?
We were along the same vein, and we were also talking about how we use the research from where class has taken us longitudinally from where they are in third grade to where even just quality preschool takes them into the future as far as graduation rates, getting degrees, children or getting incarcerated as adults, like those kind of bigger systemic changes that come from the early childhood.
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, the pipeline to prison, and it's very scary, really. It's eye-opening. Anyone else? One more person? If not, then we're going to go ahead and move. Oh, Becky. Please.
You don't make anything.
You do need that.
Sorry. Identifying what the barriers are. So like I do a thing with teachers, like the barriers and the benefits of this. So what's holding you back, and how can we deal with what's holding you back first? Because until we deal with that, they're not going to be able to even see the benefits.
Motivational living, right there. The change is fast.
The only other thing I would add is, using their own peers to talk about the issues, because they're more believable than the trainer or the university expert or whatever who's coming in telling them how they do their job. We're not perceived as walking in their shoes. But when it's their peer, someone that they really can identify with and knows that person literally lives in the same space where they live, then it makes it more believable, and then they have a sense of, okay, well, if she can do this, then maybe I can at least try.
Right. Your model. Right. Excellent. Thank you so much for your feedback. All right, now I am so excited to present Armida Lizárraga from Lima. She's going to share an experience with a professional development solution, MMCI, in Spanish in Lima. Go.
Yes. Hello. My name is Armida Lizárraga. Lorena convinced me to come here, to present. I'm usually terrified to present, but I'll just do it. So I was a teacher for many years in international schools. I've also been a teacher in public schools in the United States, and then I decided to go to grad school. And then I learned how to work with evidence to create programs that have more impact on children. And I worked at the University in Boston for 6 years, where I learned a lot. And that's where I learned class, because I was trained in class before class was Teachstone, so back in the time. And then I moved to my country, Peru, after many years away. and I was, what am I gonna do here? And there's so much to do in Peru. So I met Camila Corder, who is the founder of Luminario, and she convinced me to work with her because I was a little afraid to work in Peru with this organization there is there and education, and sometimes you don't see the impact really because things are not done in a rigorous way. That was my biggest concern. But Camila was very rigorous. She already had contacted class and Teachstone and everything. She knew everything even though she wasn't from the education field. So I worked with her, and we started around 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about our story. Then we're gonna tell you about the design study we did, a baseline study, and I'm gonna tell you why. And then our pilot program, which we're implementing now. So what our goals are to reflect on our impact in implementing this teaching coaching program with a new approach to the educational system in Peru. Usually in Peru, when you have someone coming to your classroom, it's because they're gonna evaluate you or fire you or do something that's not very nice. They are not very proactive. They don't work with you. It's really authoritative, the way they do, and they do lists. So we wanted to change all that approach. Another objective is to share our journey implementing this professional development program based on MFCI for public preschools in Lima. And we would also like to reflect on challenges and next steps. So, who are we at Luminario? We're a nonprofit association that is implementing a coaching program in public preschools in Lima for now. Our organization looks to contribute to improve children's education quality and put a higher value in the teacher profession, and bring to light the discourse about educational measurement and assessments. We have 3 pillars. One is using evidence for anything we do. We measure results, which is they do use assessments, the Ministry of Education, but you receive the results 2 years after. So why do you measure this, no? So we try to do it in a rigorous way to improve our practice. We also we have coherence. We use the curriculum. We follow everything that the Ministry of Education does or says, like meaning curriculum and teacher professional development. We're aligned with them, and we're open source, which is something very uncommon in Peru because when we started, we tried to get data or any information about what's happening in the classrooms, and no one had the data. The only study that was done in public preschools, they didn't want to share it with us, so why do you do this if you don't want to share? So we decided to be open source. We share everything we have, all our data, our information, video, whatever we have, we'll share with whoever wants to work with it in Peru. So here is Peru. And we do have some good things. We have a curriculum and covers from 0 to 18 months. We have universal preschool from 0 to 2, and it's called Cuna Más. And we have the second cycle, which is from 3 to 5. We have 86% of national coverage in public preschools. Most of the enrollment is in urban areas, even though I don't know why in public schools it's more in urban than in rural areas. In 2016, in October, we did a study to inform our program because we didn't know what was going on in the classrooms. There was no data about what teachers were doing in the classrooms. If they were following the curriculum, if they were not following, what kind of practices they were having, if they had centers, if they had played, if they talked, if they read. We didn't know anything. There was nothing. So we designed this baseline study in 4 school districts in Lima. This is, if you have been to Lima, here is like basically where everyone goes, Miraflores, Barranco, Surco, and these are like the outskirts of Lima, where all the pueblos jóvenes started 20 years ago. So that's where we went. We went to 4 school districts. We went into 64 preschools, and we worked with the, how do you call it? The school district of Lima, the big school district in Lima. And they wanted us to compare 32 schools that were, they did this thing called the best practices schools, but we don't know what the criteria is. They never told us, so we were like, all right, we'll do whatever you tell us. Yeah, we'll do anything, just let us go in. That's all we want, so we'll do it. So we did 32 best practices schools versus the rest of the sample of the schools in this. We went to 128 classrooms, and we assessed 1,536 children, and we used the Peabody. We assessed them in vocabulary. We used class, the Peabody, and we did an ELCO checklist, because ELCO was used in Chile as well, but it didn't work well, so we decided to use just a checklist of what you have literacy, what kind of literacy centers you have in the classrooms and materials. And we did a very short teacher survey to know education, age, and experience. So, findings. I could show you charts, but I decided just to put it in simple. We found significant differences between the best practices schools and the other schools in emergent vocabulary. We still don't know how. We're still analyzing this data. Some people are, we suspect there's something else in the organization of these schools, not the quality, because in class, I'll show you later, they were the same. But I think there was something that these best practices schools had. The teachers had a uniform, there was a line, there was a principal present when we were there. Kids knew where to go, those kinds of things that probably had something to do, or maybe the teachers were more motivated, were better, looked for more resources than the other teachers. We don't know, because that wasn't the purpose of the whole diagnostic. There was in one school district, it showed no changes, they were the same. So, and there were significant differences, but it wasn't too big. And some of the recurrent themes that we found were using class and looking at the qualitative and the quantitative of class. There was limited read aloud. This was really, from 128 classrooms, only 2 did read alouds. And that's when we started to dig. Why? And they said it was because the school district, their school district, especially from the school district, said that the kids should just manipulate the books and appropriate the language by themselves, which is a really bad translation of the constructivist theory behind the curriculum, we believe, but we don't know, because we asked, and we even had a meeting with the Ministry of Education, and I told her, this is what's going on, and she said, that's wrong. And we went, well, you're translating everything, and everything is like I don't know if there's a game in English, teléfono malogrado, you tell something to someone and that's who knows. Anyways, prevalence of closed questions, missed opportunities to extend language. They have centers, they're fantastic. They play for 60 minutes every day, it's mandatory. And the teachers are not allowed to talk to the kids, because they have to play. You can't interrupt their play. So we were like, this is the time where you should extend language, ask them questions, put things together, scaffold. And they were like, no, we're told that we have to be like flower pots, like standing. She told us, one teacher told us. So we're like, okay, so high level of control over the students. Some of them have assistants or paraeducators, but they're like cops. Sit down, don't move, don't do anything, or they clean. They don't have any influence on learning. They just are like facilitators of discipline, or don't move. I wanted to record it because we could listen to this, don't move, don't talk, don't do anything. Don't move, don't talk, sit down quietly. Like, how are they gonna learn if they don't? Anyway, very poor time on task. Students are often waiting, long time of waiting. In general, I don't know what is going on with the centers in the playtime, but all the classrooms would draw, the kids would draw after the playtime and tell me what you drew, and the others waited while the others finished. Everything was like that, waiting for long periods of time. And there were no differences between the best practices and other schools in class. In any domain, in any indicators, nothing. They were the same, no differences. So this is a question we have for research. So these are some examples of what we saw. You know, a boy draws a car, the teacher approaches him. What does it have? Does it have wheels? And the boy says, yes. Then draw the wheels. Then do them, that's all. Then she leaves, okay, bye. The teacher, and then it's very punitive too. If this continues, you will not have materials to work tomorrow. Is this what you want? If you don't behave, you won't get prizes. Children are working, focus on their centers. As they arrive, they mark their attendance, join a center. They work in centers. The work in centers continues for 1 hour. The teacher passes out paper to draw the students at finished centers. This is what I was talking about. Once finished, the drawings are handed to the teacher, and the children sit down in a circle to wait for the rest of the group to finish for 20 minutes or half an hour. So those were some examples that we saw, and this is our pilot program. So after we saw everything, we were trained in MMCI by Gina, that's here. And then we decided to go back and make some adjustments. And the main thing we did was split the program in 2 years. And so we do emotional, the first part of year 1. I'll show you later, but you'll see, I'm talking before it's supposed to. So this is our 2-year pilot. We had the MMCI, the emotional support is in May. We trained the teachers and the classroom organization. Train the teachers to just work on the emotional support, focus on that. And then in September, we train them in classroom organization. We work on that. Our school year goes from March to December. I forgot to mention that. And then we do 3 visits a month between May and December. It's a very intensive program. And 16 visits a year. They diagnose the teacher and the coach. They plan the lesson together. And then they go to the class, they do the coaching, and they get feedback. The teachers do lesson planning with the coach about the indicators they're gonna work on. And they change the teacher, they send this to the coaches give them feedback, and then they go the next day to visit them. This happens 3 times a month, and each coach has 4 teachers. Year 2 is more or less the same. We only dedicate ourselves the whole year to instructional support. And this is the monitoring and evaluation strategy we have now. We do class and PPBT assessment at the beginning of the year in April. Then we monitor the coaches every month. We go once a month. We adjust, we make a plan with them for each teacher. We also have meetings every Friday, weekly meetings with the team. We're 4. And at the end of the year, again, we do class and a teacher survey, which we do at the beginning too. Year 2 is the same. We only do PPBT at the beginning, same thing, and at the end. The program, some of the things we had, the issues we had in year 1 were, I call it the year of the 2 H's. We have huaicos, landslides, and huelgas, strikes. It was, I don't know how we made it, because we missed classes for like 2 months total. So we adjusted our calendar several times, and we finished the year with 16 coaching sessions, or 14 actually, for each teacher. All teachers were engaged and collaborative with only one exception. There was one teacher who was very pushy. She didn't want to do anything. and she quit the profession at the end of the year. So there were other issues with her, I guess. Emotional support went very well. Teachers changed many of their behaviors. For example, we had teachers that never sat down on the floor with the kids. Teachers that didn't call the kids by their names. They called them buddy, buddy. You know, they had 30 kids per classroom, and now they know it's important to call their names. They look at them in the eyes. They don't. I see them when I go them. They stop and they think before they are gonna yell at them. So those went really well. They're very aware of what they need to do. Classroom organization still needs more work. We're starting a review of a month on classroom organization. And we learned that having a good alliance with principals is key to be able to work in schools and adjust to unexpected terms. Principals love us. They want us to be in all their classrooms, but we want to wait for the pilot so we can scale up. But we learned that principals are key. Dealing with the government is a problem. You will see on the next slide, I think. 3 minutes more. Okay, lessons learned so far. It is important to learn how to navigate the national ministries of education. In 2 years, we have 4 ministers. This is our 4th. So every time the minister goes, more people come that we don't know. I stopped doing presentations about Minari. I just don't, because what for? You're gonna quit again? No. As long as they let us work in the schools, which they are, it's fine. It is key to have teachers working as coaches, because one of the things we found in the first service of the diagnosed baseline is that most of the teachers told us, well, the people that come to give us are girls that have no experience, very young ones, and they were never in the classroom. Why should I listen to them? So we decided right there, we have to hire teachers. So teachers that have been in the classroom at least 3 to 5 years are the coaches. We have two great coaches, Laura and Rocio. It is very important to build alliances with schools in a non-intrusive way, but a more collaborative approach. If they say no, we're not pushy ever, and we just try to find another time to ask the same question, because we know that's not the time. Things happen in the schools. Always listen to principals and teachers. Be flexible, work around their schedules in other events like the landslides, the strikes, this year World Cup. We're going to change all the schedule around World Cup. So focus on your mission. Many times principals will call you to ask for other things like, can you train the parents? Can you train them about discipline? Can you? And we say yes, but no. And we want to do it, but we can't, because if we start doing other things, we lose our focus. Challenges we found: many high level of stress in teachers, especially about the evaluation. It was the first time they're being evaluated by the Ministry of Education. Few planning hours. We found the majority struggles giving clear instructions, mixed messages. We're working on that this year. In some cases, we need to be more active coaches and shadow the teachers and tell them literally what to do. Stop now, do this, because it was not working, and intervene, which we didn't want to, but we have to. Large groups are difficult for teachers to manage. 30 students without an assistant many times. And last, our plans ahead: further develop guiding principles from our work with the purpose to hire and train next coaches. What is Luminario doing that's different besides MMCI class that's like a program and a method? Scale up in 2019 in Puno, which is in a rural area like Titicaca, and 16 to 24 schools in Lima. Continue with our collaboration with the Harvard Grad School of Education. We have 3 groups of grad students working for us for free. So they're doing a monitoring and evaluation system. They're writing scripts for our read-alouds, the textbooks, and the books they have in the classrooms. And they are also writing papers. Doctoral students are writing papers. And we're thinking really hard about a strategy to continue scaling up while assuring quality. And burning questions. any experiences or ideas on how to scale up a coaching program while ensuring quality? That's the big question. We are still working through the ropes of targeting our work to data. And that's all.
Thank you, Armida. A lot to think about, and I think that the work that, thank goodness that you are focusing on this work. It sounds like you are impacting
I don't know if I'm
so many, oh yes, you are impacting teachers and children alike. So, one quick question, we'll just take a minute for this since we are running close on time here. You were discussing quality and the lack of that quality, right? So you're trying to implement class, which is process focused, and I know that we talked about that too, Yair. So what kind of strategies can you use to focus on the process side when the level of quality is just so poor? Go ahead and discuss that within your table groups. We'll just take 1 minute. So does anyone want to share, one or two people want to share ideas that you've discussed within your small groups about how do you approach quality or trying to implement a process like class when the quality that you're starting with is so very low? Any ideas? You had an idea, would you like to share?
I just thought relationships. It's like that book, 1,000 Cups of Tea or something like that. Like even with the people that you're working with, I just think establishing good relationships so that they trust you and they can open up their ears.
Building relationships, I think that's where you definitely have to start, and those interactions are quite important. So, sorry to rush along, but I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for Stephanie and Veronica to present on their efforts, their class efforts in Canada, which is actually the secondary class.
I'm just going to take it to start. Yeah. So, weird story. I just realized that Armida, her doctoral supervisor, went and was a person I did my PhD with, and which is so weird with Anat as well. She was in there. So we're all related. It's such a small world. I just wanted to introduce myself to tell you a little bit about my initial interest in the class. I did my doctoral research with Noni Lasso on a literacy project, and I went back to grad school to answer the burning question, what are we doing that's working and how do we know? And the method that I wanted to explore was using observational data to understand what are we doing. So when I was doing this literacy study, I developed an implementation observational assessment. You know, I wanted to be the class developers, really, that's the truth. And you know, I had findings and everything, but I was just really looking at how much they were implementing this literacy program. And really, when you sat in the classrooms, that wasn't the kicker. You could see that the quality of the emotional supports, you know, the classroom organization, the instructional, all those things, those were the things I wasn't even measuring with my observational tool. So I graduated, got a job at a university, and I read this great article by Bridget Henry and Bob Pianta in Child Development. Was it 2003 or 5? I can't remember when it was published. And I thought, this is what I need. I need to understand the quality of instruction and those interactions that teachers are having with kids. So, and before class was finally developed, we had Jason Downer come up before Teachstone up to the University of Alberta, and that was the beginning of my journey. And this is my lovely doctoral student, Stephanie, who's going to talk about our journey with class with this project.
Thank you. I can't walk, which is kind of funny because I can't use the clicker, so bear with me. I might wander back. So we use the Class S, which I guess makes us a little unique. In this conference, I haven't heard anybody using it around. Although I do know, and I know the numbers, there's over 55 publications, articles using the Class S. So it is being used, and it is being used internationally. In the past year, year and a half, there's been some validation studies in both Finland and Norway, and soon to be coming one in Canada, as I finish my dissertation. No pressure. So what we really wanted to do was just to tell you the story about how we used it in junior high classrooms in Alberta, Canada. So we'll describe a little bit about the background, give you some context, talk about some of our activities, ask if anybody here would like to do a master's or PhD, because we have a ton of data available. So you can call Veronica. Talk a little bit about the findings, kind of just in general, and then some discussion, and we'll kind of lead into some larger discussion questions too. And these will be made available after the fact, so if you would like to link to the entire flexible pathways, which is what we call it, flexible pathways to success. The final report, the link is actually right on this page too, so you can take a look back if you'd like. It's got a richness to it. Now, this is one of the slides that we wanted to talk about how we kind of fit in this, three-stage journey. And we really kind of started at the baseline, and we were trying to look to see what was actually going on in these classrooms across really varied contexts. So we'll come back to that too. And then we kind of worked at it a bit. So it was total of 3 years. We were 2 years really doing the observations in these classrooms. So we had a bit of a baseline and then some kind of continued use. So this is a beautiful picture of Edmonton. So Edmonton is in Alberta, one of our provinces. In general, Northern Lights, which my 4 years living there, I never did see. But they are beautiful in the postcard. Bit of context, because I really loved how we got to see how Israel's the same size as New Jersey. Alberta is about 1.5 times the size of California. Canada is about geographically very similar size-wise to the US. However, we only have 1/10 of the population. Yeah. So we have a lot of people and a lot of living space, which actually means a lot of people kind of live along the border. So we really span out and get smaller and smaller as we kind of go more north, and that's because the weather is not so great. I actually live right on the border with Michigan now. I'm in Ontario, and we had a snowstorm today, which is kind of sad. So I get to live here tomorrow and go back to like 6 feet of snow. So some of this kind of broad context. This project was actually funded by the Alberta government. So the government decided they had this policy framework. They really wanted to be leading innovators in implementing technology in inclusive classroom settings. And they wanted to know how to do it, how to make it work, and they really wanted to kind of target students in a given classroom and see if adding technology then kind of leveled the playing field. So they had a lot of these kind of catchphrases too. They wanted to know what the essential conditions were to implement technology to level the playing field for all students. Big questions. Vague questions. And so then what were the student outcomes? And so to kind of tag along with it, they wanted researchers to come along and see kind of how these were going to happen, how things were going to roll out. I'll come to it in a bit too, but the way the project was set up was that the government put out a call for the schools and to fund the schools to do their own projects, as well as in parallel for researchers, so the University of Alberta in this case, to then kind of tag along and do the research or evaluation component to the projects. So multi-levels. Basically, these were big questions. So kind of what Veronica was saying before, or how do we do this? And does it really make a difference? So to kind of guide the context, we're looking at implementation science. So how do you take an effective intervention? How do you maintain some effective implementation? So what that fidelity and how do you get it to roll out? And what are those contexts? So how do you take all of that to get significant outcomes? Huge questions, right? Yeah, and we were also really going from this developmental evaluation framework, so we didn't want to be top-down because we were kind of in parallel. So we really wanted to be more of a, bottom-up. We wanted to be able to feed back. So it's this idea of taking, real-time data that made sense to them, gave it right back to the schools and to the teachers so they could use it, shift, evolve practice. I don't want to say change practice because no one wants to be told they need to change. But we wanted things to shift, right? They're really changing how they use technology, and so we thought that if we were looking at the class and the entire kind of environment, we could kind of capture that. So how maybe bringing iPads into the classroom and really being intentional in how you were implementing them would kind of spill over into those other instructional practices. In the perfect world, evaluation is a nice, straightforward, we know where we're going, we know what we're going to implement, we know what we're going to measure, we have these outcomes. But in the flexible pathways world, it's a little more like this. So we had these plans and these ideas and things changed and shifted, and sometimes we really didn't know where we were going because we were trying to kind of tag along with these projects and it was really hard. We had an idea that they would, assess their class, find someone who had some literacy needs, identify maybe some assistive technology like an app that could support those literacy needs, implement it, bring the kiddo up, and reassess and see gains. That's not what we saw. A lot of the schools just implemented technology in really varied ways. Almost all of them did get iPads, but they weren't really programmatic in how they were choosing assistive technology or implementing it. So they were kind of more about the cool app that was going on at the time. So, they were showing everyone how to use Socrata or some other ones we saw. There's a note to everything.
And yeah, there were many of them.
There was lots, yeah. We're doing puppets and puppet shows. There were a lot of different kind of implementations, but not interventions in the kind of sense that we had hoped for or anticipated, really. So it was a bit of a messy pathway. Coming back to our context, so 5 different jurisdictions were funded to implement their technology projects. Fort Vermilion, which is way up north. Lakeland, which is kind of a small rural community, really oil-driven, I would say, working class. Greater St. Albert, which at one point had the highest per capita income in all of Canada, so it's a wealthy suburb of
Lots of
Edmonton.
hockey players.
Yes, lots of hockey players, retired hockey players. Prairie Land, which is very flat, very prairie land-like, very farmer-oriented. They actually build their school year kind of around when the kids need to help in the farm and the fields a bit more. And Airdrie, which is kind of outside of Calgary, which is a large city, so it's again more of a suburb, a little more multicultural. Was that 47 students? The consenting students?
Total participants, because we didn't just have teachers.
So, and participants included, when it came to students, not all students consented. So when we were doing our classroom video recordings, it was a bit of a challenge too, because they wanted to be able to blur out faces, which we don't have the technology to do.
We didn't.
So yeah, we did that, not easily. Anyway. So these are the consenting students in the kind of first column, and then the consenting voluntold, I would like to say, voluntold teachers across each project, and then the targeted students. So that was the idea of choosing a student that had some additional needs that they could kind of target their interventions towards. Just to kind of give you a bit more context of how varied these locations were. This is one school district, so a 98% First Nations Métis population. So this is our rural community, way up north. It was primarily First Nations, and then the teachers were primarily Caucasian white from the east coast of Canada. They would fly them in, and they would stay for a year or two, so not a long time. often, and they kind of teach out the year.
All recent grads.
All recent waiting first year teachers. About 85% were identified with some kind of a learning challenge in at least one way, often multiple. And about 20% had some kind of a diagnosis or actual designation. In comparison to our other school district, with only 1% First Nations, about 30% of the teachers identified they had some challenges or needs, but only 5% had an actual designation. So some of the activities we did, and I kind of broke it up, so Alberta Education is the government branch, and they really kind of oversaw not only the funding, but they also led what we call research communities of practice. So we got together 5 times? 5 times across 2.5 years, I would say, for the meetings, and really kind of tried to target whatever the topic was. So in the first few, we spent a lot of time introducing the class and the idea of developmental evaluation, but the idea that we weren't evaluating, so we were very cautious about the language we used, and really wanted to show them what the class was and what the observations were going to feel like. And then our other activities included site visits, so we went around to those 5 jurisdictions, and there were often more than one school per jurisdiction, and we did our observations, so we did them at least 4 time points, fall, spring, 2 years, so 13, 14, and then 14, 15. We also did a lot of interviews, focus groups, questionnaires, student surveys, teacher questionnaires, educator questionnaires, collected a ton of artifacts, and a lot of time. So this is where there's a ton of data. We also, in the questionnaires, there were some other measures that were included, so there were some kind of specific questions that were included, as well as other measures that have been used before, so looking at things like collaboration, technology use, self-determination theory at one point, the tripod survey, which was used in the MET study, because we were looking at the class, so we were trying to align a lot of different things. So our participants did a lot of work for us over 2 years, and this is why, if you would like to do a master's or a PhD, please call Veronica.
We, not only, when we went in to do the classroom observations, we actually coded we took video and we coded it twice, actually about 3 times actually. Once using the class, another with a rubric that we developed about technology, use of technology in the classroom as well, and the kind of level of, sort of something like Bloom's taxonomy, the kind of level of cognitive complexity of what was actually going on content-wise.
But specific to the class, some of the activities that we did were the classroom observations, and year 1 and 2, and really that kind of set up time. Year 1, another part of our interviews and the time that we spent directly with teachers was also to provide them with some coaching and direct feedback. It varied greatly because it was really up to their willingness to participate and their openness. But we created what we call actionable feedback. So we actually gave them back all their scores in a nice color-coded way that I'll show you shortly, so that they actually had it in their hand. It was about a 10-page document by the time we were done, at the end of the first year, that had all of that kind of feedback for them. So a lot of time kind of in that first year setting up the class, setting up what we were looking for, what we were kind of hoping to see, what it meant. And then we didn't have that in the second year. So we really expected the same teachers to continue across this 2-year project. And this is a challenge that we often see in research, is this kind of attrition and turnover. And so we kind of expected that their own communities of practice would bring the new teachers up to speed on the class. You know, we couldn't kind of go back and present it again. And that ended up being part of our challenge. We're going to show you more of the first year data that we have so far. We haven't, I don't think, looked at it across the 2 years in a clear enough way yet. So again, students needed. So this is some of the feedback that we provided to them. This is across all jurisdictions. Need a clicker. You'll have this, you can take a look too. So the first kind of line shows the fall and then a spring underneath it across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then an aggregated score down the final so they can see across the whole project kind of where they sat.
And you can see we color coded. So we're looking at the brilliant green is where you want to hang out. And then the red alert there was where when we saw things that were absent or on the one end of the scale. And based on what you can, this is aggregated across all of the divisions of first one.
This one's just one jurisdiction, right?
And one jurisdiction.
So just another example of how we fed back. And then for another jurisdiction. So we had some variability. Let me just speed up. So this is across by teacher. So this is aggregated across all the time points that we had. So that they had to be observed more than one time point to be included in this data set, because we know, the more we observe, the stronger it is. So this is across all of it, just looking at the broad domains. So there's some division, and like we keep hearing, instructional supports tend to come in quite a bit lower. Higher emotional scores, emotional support, generally kind of that mid to high. Regard for adolescent, a little lower. Similar trends that we find everywhere else, so our validation study will likely support the class S anyways in Alberta. And here's some more of that lower kind of mid to low range in the instructional supports. And I have to say, I recently recertified to code do some second coding of some of our data, and I'm a tough coder now. I think I'm tougher than before. But interestingly enough, I passed the recertification first time through, and it's been 3 years since I coded last. So to me, it speaks to the power of what you're actually observing and that you can see it. So it doesn't kind of go away. So here's a comparison across 2 teachers. So we have teacher A from the rural jurisdiction, who's a first-year teacher, far away from home. He considered himself to be an early technology adopter, so the guy who ran out to buy the newest iPhone the second it released. School context, a lot of new teachers, isolated community, high level of First Nations or Métis, and high level of needs. Often teachers at this school taught kind of multiple streams at the same time. So they would teach kind of their mainstream, and they would have what we call a knowledge and employability stream, which tend to be kids with other additional learning needs or like a learning disability diagnosis. So they would modify the curriculum and teach it at the same time. In contrast, a teacher with a lot of years of experience considered herself to be a late majority technology adopter. She was the last person really to buy the iPhone in a suburban school district, not many needs in her classroom. 1 minute. So teacher A, this is part of the feedback that we provided back to them. So you can see he's got some yellows down there. He's got some differences, so he did make some gains across the year from fall to spring. Some of the other things that we coded for and provided feedback on included that technology use, so I'll let you take a look at that if you're interested in the slides. And then teacher B, where she kind of dropped in some areas, depending on what content she was teaching, I would say. But she was a very strong teacher. And so you see fewer kind of yellows in there. And very different technology use. Strengths and challenges. Year 1, we spent a lot of time introducing the class and coaching kind of informally and individually and in groups and to the government. We actually included them in our class coding session, so they were part of it, they were aware of what we were doing. And it really gave us this language and this alignment between researchers and teachers, because we could talk about teaching. They weren't seeing us as the experts coming and telling them about teaching. We could share about it instead. And actually concurrently, Veronica and I had also worked on developing a course for our teachers education program that we developed around the class model. So we had a lot of examples and could link back and forth. And we could also use the examples from our classrooms in the research project to bring it back to these pre-service teachers. Challenge was definitely buy-in. Second year, we had increased comfort being observed by the teachers. I think I heard that in the presentation yesterday too, that kind of from the fear to like, oh yeah, they're here again. And that kind of continuity, so for some of the teachers that were in first year and continued through, we had relationships. It was very different than some of the new teachers who came in who didn't get that kind of background part in class. And so that was really one of our challenges, was that changeover. And there is the final discussion. Thank you.
Well, because we are about to the end of our session, I think we're gonna need to skip additional discussion questions because I would like you to have the opportunity to ask any of our presenters questions from what you have seen and heard today. Does anyone have any questions for them?
I'm curious from any or all of you, you've shown a lot of quantitative data about the impact of the program in various states in your progression, but I always find it so interesting to just get from teachers a qualitative sense of how did they experience this? What ahas did they have? What did they tell you that surprised you, or that despite what their scores showed really validated that they're getting it and they're on the path?
We did take a lot of interview data, and in our report, we actually report out the teachers' voices. But for example, that junior teacher that Stephanie shared, he was someone who loved being observed. He loved getting the feedback. It was the first time anyone had ever, even in his pre-service program, actually gave him such detailed feedback. So we did get, and we had comments from, that was really one of the big pieces, that how rarely students or teachers are getting this level of in-depth feedback. As one, you might think another.
So they also really enjoyed that discussion piece when we kind of sat down and had those discussions. And some of them had professional learning communities, so they could bring back to not only the other teachers in the Flexible Pathways project, but those in their schools. So they kind of use that language into the conversation.
Anyone else? Great. Any more questions? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. I want to thank all of our presenters that have come from very far places across the globe. And just, in closing, I just want to reiterate something that Rebecca Berlin has been talking about at the keynote sessions, and that is connect, collaborate, and continue the conversation. So we had a chance to connect to different countries and different cultural contexts through the presentations that we saw today. We were also able to connect in small group discussions and also collaborate on providing ideas, exchanging ideas to many challenges that we all face, right, on a global level, with providing quality education and really achieving impact. And I invite you to continue the conversation on a global level, whether it be through our class learning community, whether it be connecting with one of the presenters, exchanging information. One of my personal goals working within International is to connect more people through class on a global level. So thank you again so much for coming, and we hope you have a wonderful day and safe travels home. Thank you.